Hey all, it's Paul from Drums and Rums with the Backbeats Meets the Spirit. This episode is sponsored by Club Tiki. Visit them at clubtikico.com to order rum-based cocktails in a can. Use promo code Drums and Rums to receive a discount and free shipping when you order 2 4-packs or more. They can the tropics so you don't have to.
I'm having once upon a bottle of rum.
Hey all, it's Paul from Drums and Rums with the Backbeats Meets the Spirit. We have a great guest for you on this show today. Our guest, ancestor, and namesake was a merchant rum distiller and a successful American privateer during the American Revolution. His fleet totaled more than 25 ships, including the True American, for which one of their rums is named for. Let me introduce our guest to the podcast, the CEO, COO of Privateer Rum, Andrew Cabot. How are you doing, Andrew?
I am very well.
Excellent.
Good to see you again, Paul.
Yeah, it's good to we're just saying long time no see, February time frame where we were talking about the Florida Rum Society Miami takeover, and I'm surprised, and hopefully, did you get one of these? You said
no. I think you know the answer to that one. No, I did not.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Cucurullo is getting a call after this call.
Yes, that's right. Take it up with his folks. Have your people talk to his people? Yes. So I'm sure there's got to be later. Actually, I think I remember seeing somewhere on the Facebook page, somebody must have posted like, "Oh, I put my bag down. Is there any extra ones?" Like, man, what happens in Miami stays in Miami.
Especially if you put it down.
Yeah. So definitely, and that was great that there was very much pulled a short time frame to turn around an event like that with that group, and we've got a really great a Rum Society group here in Florida. Appreciate you definitely like yourself to come down to participate, and I think that was a great afternoon. All the guests that came in, and the topics you covered about the history, and just amazing how a lot of about New England, which I want to talk about, and but also first off though, February wasn't the first time we met. It was actually at a tasting at Primo Liquors. So big shout out there to Primo Liquors. Yes. So that was so I picked up a bottle, and I keep it actually I keep this bottle. So you'll be happy to know, right? I keep this bottle inside the drum here. So this one is actually I probably have to get a lock on this one because I keep this one. I keep some of the bottles up in here where I try to keep it away from people. Like, it's like careful the stuff you leave out for your friends because all of a sudden they're drinking the good stuff, right? So let me go ahead and start this off here. Right, there we go.
All right, which one is that? I can't see the label.
Yep. So this is the Rum the Jewels.
Solid.
So this is a 113 proof. So this was an age for 4 years in used rum casks. So is that typically something that other rums are used as other rum casks? And I know we could probably we'll talk a little bit about that during the rum portion.
No, we could definitely dive in. I think it is used rum. That's not our normal. It's probably about 30% of our business is used rum. It's probably about 99% of rum is actually aged in used and reused casks. Excuse me. We've really dialed into kind of a traditional New England style, American spirit style, which we'll talk about later in this podcast, I'm sure. But for a very simple view of it, there's a flavor that's created and transferred from a barrel. And then there's the chemistry that happens in a barrel over time. And they're different things. And what is typically required of a barrel that's going into a used cask is more time. A 2-year-old whiskey in New American Oak has a very pronounced, developed feel to it. A 4-year-old, even more so. And it goes from there. But if you're just going to go into a used cask, you are going to have to let some evaporation and some chemistry cycles start to get to the desired flavors of a spirit. So I think it's really fun to go back and forth between the two.
Okay. Yeah.
And I might add, a lot of our blended products are always, we really like the brights of slightly older used cask and the strength and power of a sub 7-year-old new cask.
And is those casks or the barrels, are they privateer barrels or is it solely?
Great question. We buy a lot of barrels, and barrels, like everything else in this world, has gone up significantly in the last really the last year. But we also, every time we harvest a barrel, Yes, we give some away to breweries and fun projects and things that we like. Yes, we sell some because other people would like to use our barrels. But for the most part, we hang on to them. And we're trying to grow our barrel room. We probably will add 300 barrels this year. That means we have to make quite a bit more by the time you deplete what we've sold this year. And we actually just took over another 40,000 square foot building as the second and third barrel room for the company, just to meet the future demands. And what's the demand stress? The demand stress is older rums, more markets, more blends. And so it's not a linear meeting the sales numbers. It's actually producing maybe 4 or 5 times as much rum this year as we need to sell in a few years out.
Right. So, and that's a great, I think, point to start with, right? Is aged rum has exploded, and that means it's going to take some time. So
yes.
So this all started for you back in 2010, where from what I understand, you were looking at what the market was out there for the rums that people were used to, and were ready, wanted to elevate some things that were not sweetened or post or hidden, behind what's in it, and not as transparent and adulterated and all those things. And I guess as they call it, did you throw the gauntlet down and said, and jumped into the floor
with all the earnestness of a complete amateur? Yes. Okay. I'm going to make one correction. I said 4 to 5 times future sales. I meant 4 to 5 times present day sales. So forgive that note. I think, the way I'd say it is when you look at rum today, and the numbers were a little different 10 years ago, but every analyst report you read would say rum is going to be the next spirit to premiumize. Premiumization is the path for the escalation of rum and the popularization of rum. They acknowledged pretty clearly that 56-7% of rum is spiced, which I think is fair to say you begin to question if that's really rum as a spirit. Complete respect to some of the beauty who have made spiced rums out there. Flavored rums was another big significant percentage. And when you actually dial all the way back to, unsweetened, unflavored, unspiced rums, you were really down to a very small percentage. And what I liked about that opportunity, just purely from a business perspective, is nobody ever gives you the top. Now, did we have any right thinking we could achieve the top at the time? No. We were just thinking, is it a rational starting point?
Right.
But what made it more personal, and probably what made me stick to it and never give up and love what I do and lose a little sleep every now and then, is family history was privateering, absolutely. But I love one of the sort of historical discoveries of selling their distillery and the wharf it was on to allow for the larger privateers that they were adding as the war escalated. What's war? War is getting bigger and stronger every year. You've seen all the the data on World War II or whatever it is. Technology matters, evolution matters. And when they started at the beginning of the revolution, they had smaller privateers. They were repurposing ships that were meant for other things. A couple of years into the revolution, they had a lot of purpose-made ships. Very fast, very strong, carried a lot of people, carried a lot of guns. And those ships got bigger and bigger and forced the Cabot brothers, who were the privateers and original rum distillers, to sell their inner harbor wharf. The boats couldn't get to the dock. Pretty simple. Equally, they chose that privateering was a much more lucrative business. When you had, we call it English rule, you had to pay sugar and molasses, tariffs and taxes, and all these complicating factors. They figured out that once the Brits no longer had a grip, all of those tariffs were gone. There was no need to protect. Obviously, there was no ability to protect the English market. And so the market that they were very successful at, which was also smuggling, as they were merchants, evaporated. So you have this opportunity, and they achieved it. I mean, Andrew Cabot, 6 generations up from me, was a millionaire in the day, 18th century.
Wow.
That's not easily achieved. Today, it's a little more common, of course, but their success with privateering was massive. And we can measure that in terms of the effects on the war. Well, if you want to make an empire unhappy, make the business class unhappy. And the privateering at the time got insurance rates on English transports and merchant cargoes up to 75% of the value at a peak. Now, it wasn't always there. I don't want to overstate that. But when you're forcing a merchant to pay 75% of the value of a cargo to get it across a span of water, you are going to have a very angry merchant class that is the one that pays for that navy in the first place. And the effect of, here we are fighting the Americans are fighting the biggest navy in the world. And did they go after the strongest part of the navy, or did they go after the thing the navy is meant to protect? And the privateering was exceedingly effective. So needless to say, very lucrative, deep personal association. And what I particularly like is privateering is a part of history that we want to forget. A lot of people made a lot of money. It doesn't seem quite as honorable as three-corner hats and blue uniforms. So it disappears until, all of a sudden, War of 1812. We still don't have enough of a navy. So we're back to the privateering, and after that, it starts to fade as our country matures. But there's such an authenticity to it. There's such a powerful story to that I thought that was a good fit for a craft brand. It's all true. I can document it. I've certainly done plenty of research on it. It's very personal. So my feet are to the fire. I've got the values of my family telling me to make sure I always do the right thing, which is actually ultimately very, very good. And I like that in the moment of interpreting what the privateer was and understanding that rum was such a weak category, back from the data we talked about, that you wanted something that authentic to represent you, even if it was unfamiliar. And I think the poetry between an unfamiliar historical phenomenon and the unfamiliar of quality rum had a nice sort of ring to it put together. So I like that. Yeah. And that's where the brand was launched.
Okay.
The vehicles of the day was craft movement. You know what that was? Everybody got a break. The legacy of the craft movement will be, you'll see a lot of hybrid stills at distilleries for a long time. People were trying to make many, many things. We, I think, correctly elected to make one thing well. And that was iconoclastic. To say, we're going to go do one thing well. We're going to pick the weakest category out there. We're not going to make a vodka. We're not going to sell T-shirts and do a lot of, hospitality. We really just dialed into doing one thing well, institutional knowledge, getting better over time. Oh. And I think, particularly in this last year, we'll talk about that in this call, but we really cleared some of those last steps, and we realized who we were, and we realized how true we were to New England style of rum, and we're seeing the success because of it.
All right, So 10, 11, 12. Well, I'm trying to do math here. Well, my math is all thrown off because of COVID years. We subtract COVID years out of all that, so that's why
they're like dog years.
Yeah, that's why we remove those. So because 2010, you think back to the landscape of the rest of the country, let alone just the Massachusetts or New England areas. A lot of the rum companies in here in the U.S., like you said, there was not a whole lot going on in 2010 for rum in made here in the U.S. Right?
To bring back your and some of the people that are sort of aficionados will remember this. You were seeing all sorts of brand entries like 10 Cane. I think LVMH, trying to put a rum out there. A lot of people were buying into the premium rum thing. They just couldn't figure out how to do it. And it's interesting to see these sort of designed by marketing committee concepts. There's certainly, I know the people that are at home are listening, listing 25 other ones off the top of their heads. But there was this sort of luxury brand concept that was hovering. And at the same time was going through the Bacardi's big push for, you probably remember the naked navel of the Bacardi Mojito ads that were running pretty aggressively around then.
Yeah.
So put your mullet back on and go back into this point in time.
Hey, wait a minute. Did my mom share pictures of me? I
can't say.
Okay.
But it was sort of an ugly transitional time, and some of the tea leaves we were reading and I think rightly felt that the big brands that actually made a pure rum, although I don't necessarily agree with their quality choices, weren't prepared to creatively cannibalize their massive market share to do something better. And I thought it's very hard, and we've all seen this from brands that try, low end brand that tries to spin off a high end, play. It's very hard to dodge the original reputation. Mm-hmm. And so we probably knew we would. It's always more comfortable saying hindsight, but let's just say, I will say that I had enough logic to think that we probably had a 10-year window before we saw the big brands play in the space more aggressively. And you talked about meeting in Florida. It's interesting to see, and I'm going to change brands here, but a brand like Bacardi now trying to figure out how to work with clubs and trying to understand how to turn their model much more to the higher. I don't say higher quality, the smaller brands that are very focused on high quality goods,
right,
and don't have the underlying industrial products. And I think that's actually a very healthy sign for rum. I think now the people are out of the gate. It's a fair fight, and for lack of better language, bring it.
Right, and it's that's the beautiful thing, Andrew, is what I've discovered and evolved myself and learned. And again, I'm always sometimes, at least the podcast, I try to do a little bit of my homework to make sure I do my research about each guest and so forth. But I always find it I love to learn more. I learned so much from y'all, right? It's
it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, and the thing is too is the craft part of all of this industry is just amazing, right? And everyone has it. And look, I'm sure a lot of craft distillers. Look, they're not competing against each other, right? Right. And Bacardi and Captain Morgan own 50% of the market, right? And I don't know. More. Yeah. And I'm sure, like you said, back in the 10 almost turn of the century. Oh my God, that sounds weird. Turn of the century. Yeah. 2000s. All right. Let's start. Am I showing my age? I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all this history that's got me all excited. That's why. Yeah.
That's so funny. Long view.
Yeah.
Long view.
Yeah. So early 2000s, like you said, there wasn't. I'm sure those two brands probably had a much bigger market share than what it is today, right? So again, that's
all that data is quickly available, and I honestly can't remember exactly what the numbers are, but the great strength of this last handful of years, and there's so many vehicles. A vehicle to me is an element that allows you to achieve your domain or goal or whatever it is. But let's give credit to houses like Vellier, who brought a lot of brands to the U.S. market, and they became collectible and wonderful, and the elites really love them, and they talk about them and all that. But just being pretty pragmatic about it, because of their efforts, we all got to see initially rums that we might not have seen as easily. That were high quality, right. And then in a world of where you don't know the brand that you're about. Yes, of course, some people do. But, if it's a relatively new brand and you're forced to make choices, and not inexpensive ones, to know that you can trust the House of Vellier or whichever it is to put something, reasonably good in front of you. It may not be your favorite. It may, And then in time, what you're seeing now is a lot of those brands, Worthy Park and others, and I have a rule not to talk about other distilleries, which we'll talk about next, but from a very pragmatic consumer perspective, they all now have distribution here. And it all started with those initial early landings. And there's nothing simple about trying to put yourself in a handful of states in the U.S. with a separate relationship with each state, and think about container logistics from a Caribbean island or whatever you're adding to complicate your picture. Yes, it probably goes to New Jersey, but it doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, you've really started to feed this early adopter model. I'm obviously referencing Jeffrey Moore and his work on Crossing the Chasm. And you're feeding the excitement at the very elite end of rum. And, you probably know this, but the majority of the rum clubs started with COVID. Of course, there's some before. Look at Martin Cate, very bricks and mortar. He's got a bar, he's got books. It's very, forgive me, it's analog. But a lot of these clubs in the states that we work in were born in the last few years, including Florida Rum Society. You're 1,400 and X members. you're 2.5 years old, approximately. I apologize. I should know that, but I don't. And born out of, we have a common interest. We include others. We want to share knowledge, disseminate information, have a fun time. Perfect. Right. And now Rum is suddenly having this really interesting window of a lot of people. And that goes back to what we talked about in Florida. I mean, I don't want to pull your listener too much around, but when Paul and I first met, we met at that takeover in Miami, where the Florida Rum Society said it's great to have a host for a rum event, but we have enough members that we're going to throw the event ourselves. And in 3 weeks, the Florida Rum Society had enough credibility to bring in 2 CEOs, a COO, the members from the Velier team, and then, of course, a distilling team from Haiti, a Claren distilling team. What did you have, about less than 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah. It was quick.
And everybody signed up. Here you got all these people booking last minute flights because they understood, and from a supplier perspective, that the clubs are the most exciting thing going on in rum.
Yeah.
And we all showed up, and you heard my speech, which is, forgive me, I'll just repeat it, but it was, the key note was, please notice what's going on. Please notice how important you are. 2 years ago, you felt lucky when somebody would call you back from a distillery. Now understand that people are hiring at distilleries to meet and greet people like you because they think you're one of the most important channels out there. Keep growing your clubs. Keep being better at clubs. Keep helping other clubs start. Mm-hmm. Push for things like transparency and your rights as consumers. Push for reasonable pricing. You guys are a market that's finally emerging in a category that has managed to avoid having a stable market for good rum for as far as history goes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and we definitely I'm not speaking for the spokesman for the Florida Rum Society, but yeah, I definitely think it's very well reciprocated. Andrew is, it's great to have a common thing and then to enjoy it. Like I said, there's nothing's pretentious, and I just remember that afternoon, that Saturday. I mean, but that was my first, pretty much a exposure to an all day rum tasting, and I should have probably just stopped drinking at that point because that was some good stuff and some high proof stuff. Okay, so and then coordinate events at Exotico and Swizzle and all these things. It was like I had a great weekend, and I'm only about an hour north of here in Miami, but here in West Palm area, and I had a great time. And met a lot of great people, and like yourself, and so forth. So yeah, it's great. Again, how do we all help grow and vehicles, like you said, avenues, whether it's this podcast, somebody who's listening to it, and listeners that are outside the U.S. For me, I do have some good listeners that are outside the U.S. And so they learn about something new that they've never been exposed to in somewhere else, and they say, well, that kind of sounds interesting, let me find out more, how do I get it? And then so it's great. The internet for once is good for something, other times it sucks ass.
Yeah, but okay, so throw it together, what's it, $600 a week, a lot of people that can't go out to bars anymore. And there's a book called Bowling Alone, which is sort of the decline of the self-organizing group, think Shriner and think bowling clubs and all the rest. But it was interesting how COVID reversed a lot of that. And now you do have self-organizing, interest-based, cool things that took off. Yeah. I mean, think about puzzle making. Think about all these rum clubs.
I got one for you.
Oh, go. What, do you have a victory?
No, you said all the things that happened because of COVID here. And here it is. It's the coloring books.
We went too big. Oh,
yeah,
that's pretty funny.
It's actually that's the coloring book here.
Florida man. That's really funny. But again, we went through it. We went through that together.
Yeah.
And I think I get to talk to a lot of clubs, and as you know, we can talk about it later. But we had a lot of the clubs up in March and early April to help organize the clubs into their own association. And really get behind the mission of, help larger clubs helping smaller clubs get stronger. Each has a natural domain, i.e. it's often by state, but sometimes there's more than one in the state.
Right.
They have learned how to advocate more and more and more and more. They've learned how to buy and share barrels, and I shouldn't say learned, of course they do, but they now have a framework that encourages it.
Right.
And this is their creation, this is their design. The only point I made when we were trying to bring them together is you guys actually have the power to completely change the spirit you love. Get more from the suppliers, make us all work harder and make better products, make them more available to you in more places. And that is going to be a consumer-led revolution because, unlike bourbon and champagne and all the examples there is no top-down authority in rum. There's a complete absence in the vacuum that creates. It's going to be the consumer that helps raise the standards and hold accountable and drive forward.
Right. It's the Wild West in a good way, but there's also, but.
So one of the things we talked about, obviously all podcasts have a 5-minute check-in, but, one of the things we talked about before was when we sort of think about the whiskey world, and I mean, specifically we're talking about the Whiskey Live event, you sort of know what to expect with a whiskey. If you're going to open up a bottle of rye, you may have preferences, but you sort of have a feeling of what you're going to get. And if you open a bottle of scotch, sure, we can go, smokiness versus complexity, and you can do an XY graph, and you can plot it, and you can have preferences again. And the same with bourbon, and the same with tequila, or let's say white tequila, and you're just there's a fairly significant consistency product to product. But in whiskey, it is my favorite because each of the definitions, Irish, Scottish, blah, 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 are pretty darn clear. And I think what we talked about with rum is, yes, I can identify a Jamaican rum. So yes, I can identify a Barbadian rum. But there's an awful lot of rum out there that's a complete surprise. And I think somebody who has tried let's say a Jamaican, then goes off and tries a Martiniquan Agricole and doesn't understand why that can be called the same thing.
Right.
And that heterogeneity is both a strength, and it's also, it makes the consumer doesn't have the easy handle to pick up what they like and explore necessarily until they invest time and get curious and join clubs and have access to lots of other things.
Right. And without some of those things and no names, I had to scold a coworker of mine who had was using, I won't say the name, but it starts with an M, and in their
I'm playing Wordle in my head now.
There you go, Rum Wordle, right? Anyway, and but he was just trying to simply mix it with his Gatorade while he was golfing, right? So again, I said, really, that's what you chose to use, and that company is more than welcome to come on if they figure out who I'm talking about, but we'll leave it at that. And I said, okay, it's a certain style of rum. I says, hey, why don't you try this? It's a similar product. It's local, it's here in Florida. It doesn't have all that other sugar in it, etc. And sure enough, he went out and picked up the product, saw it in this local store here, and I was like, hey, there you go. I mean, it's and that's how it is. Like you said, the word of mouth, the groups, and sharing, and the educating, and hey, try this if you like that, and so yeah.
It's going to change things. It is changing things already.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very lucky to have the clubs. The evolution of the clubs during COVID, in a sense, is will change the market for rum forever. I think it is the catalyst.
Right. Yeah. That's
and the vehicle.
It's exciting. It's very exciting. So the rums that you made, I was reading it on the website here and talking about the molasses that you use from Guatemala, and then there's a team, I guess, that you could talk about the I guess a little bit how the molasses that you use, whether it's the process, how you the folks behind that company that you acquire it from, or source from.
So again, remember, I'm a grumpy old Yankee, so I'm going to give it to you more straight than a marketing person would, and I think that's important. I think the world needs less marketing. But our favorite supplier, said bluntly, is Madre Tierra, and that's in Santa Lucia, Guatemala, and we're very happy with the product they make. we very much believe in the mission of the company. We very much believe in their values, and those are all wonderful things. The key, and while we would look for that, and we did look for that, I think what I would say is what matters most is that the molasses is amazing. And I think, that's, while I think I could give them praise all day for who they are, I think the real praise is what they make, and so forth. So the only wrinkle to all of this is we're living in the age of COVID, where probably 90% of our molasses comes from them. But occasionally there's wrinkles. Logistics. Our distributor for Crosby's for 3 months couldn't get us molasses.
Wow.
And so we'll switch to other grade A molasses. Beautiful, very happy. But if we had to weigh them, we'd probably always take what we get from Guatemala. Not for necessarily just ethical reasons, but we actually think it has a better taste.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that everybody who saw their prices go up, be it gas or something else, understands that we're living in a really complicated world. We're very happy to have all of those headaches that it was the logistics company, the distributors had solved. But I have to always be careful to say most of our rum comes from there. Most of our molasses, most of our rum is made from that source. But I'm always going to put a little asterisk on it. Single origin is obviously very attractive, and for a host of reasons. We know where it came from. I mean, when you pick up a privateer bottle, it says on the back distilled. It doesn't say produced. It doesn't say all this soft language that allows for clever marketing people to buy something and sell it as something they made. Same thing for us. We really know that if it's single sourced, we know the area they're in, we know how clean the soil is. We are not as worried about the byproduct of the process of making molasses or contaminants from the soil or anything else. And, we are living in a very industrial world. We have to get chemical sheets on every truck we receive. We get an 18-wheeler about every 3 to 4 weeks. A big tanker truck like you see on the highway. And it gives us great confidence to have actually very relatively small batches come in, 4,400 gallons at a time. Know what we're getting, look at the chems, see what the deviation is batch to batch, very little. Know what potential contaminants are, preferably close to zero. Think like your RO system. It's going to tell you there's something in the water, but it's so far from the norms that it's very compelling. Their molasses is all made from fresh cane juice, 100% natural, no additives, no preservatives, and it's non-GMO certified. So again, the kind of one of the preaches I have is never let somebody else tell you about a distillery. Talk to the distillery. If they lie to you, it's on them. If somebody tells you about somebody else, always be cautious. And what was I going to say about that? We believe that there is a relationship and balance in everything you do in distilling. And that's where, some words like terroir, which are popular, and élevage, which are popular, and they're from wine and other things, animal husbandry. It's sort of funny what I'm throwing there. It's our job to say we operate in New England. We operate in the historical context of the rum. We focus on 1865 to Prohibition. Beautiful rum being made up here in New England, less known, often confused with Bedford rum, which was both in that window, but largely from the colonial era. We have to think about what our raw ingredient is, because that's a source of flavor. Much of our flavor is created in fermentation, and so we're adding yeast to it. Byproducts are going to detract, they're going to take away, and we have an additive process. We don't adulterate, we don't filter, we don't correct things. So any mistake we make is only compounded as you synthesize it through distilling. And then the second introduction of alcohol flavor, even though some strict distillers don't like this, but it's true, is when we go into barrel. And so when we start adding the hit of the new American oak and the lignans in the wood, and that first touch of a fresh barrel, of a new American oak barrel, we are also adding flavors. And then after that initial window, we are also benefiting from the chemistry that from used barrels and evaporation and everything else. And I put too hard a line between new and used there, but I think that's a helpful way to start, and then we can nuance later. Right. And we're great believers that we've found that relationship and balance in our process, from ingredient to how we age, how we go into barrel and lower proof, how we do all the things we do, that allows us to be one of the very, very few producers of rum in the world that is making rum in the American spirit way, the new American white oak.
Right. Yeah. And it's great that it's right. And again, like I said, I love talking. And then when questions are asked to the distillers, the passion, right, the pride, and of what I mean. If you're not that, why do it then, right? If you're not going to make crap, that's not who you are, and right. And I don't know you super well, but I can, from what a little bit of our interaction, I know that's not you, right? And
no, you got to make your best, and you put your family name on it.
Mm-hmm.
It even holds your feet to the fire more,
right?
So it's there's no doubt.
Yeah,
but let's think about all this. All of this, has brought us to a place where I would say we've very much established ourselves around the world, and I'll give you some examples as the bridge to rum for many. And while we talked about the heterogeneity of rum, when you make rum in a spirit style that is familiar, bourbon, New American oak, and you focus on the highest quality all the time, and you make the context of where you age work with the style of spirit, i.e., if I age my barrels in the Caribbean or in Georgia or in Florida or in Louisiana, our rum isn't our rum. It's going to over extract the wood. We're going to have a completely different product in our hands. And all the people that say you shouldn't use New American oak are going to prove themselves right. Mm. But in the context where we operate and with the approach we've taken, here's a funny story, but at 2.5 years, the initial reviews, including a very high mark by Ultimate Spirits, might have been a little more than 2.5, but right around there, less than 3. You get very high marks, but the people are warning you that you can't leave rum in New American oak for too long. And then out comes Bottle and Bond, and things come out, and they're suddenly giving you the warning that, well, you really shouldn't leave rum in New American oak for 4 years, much longer than 4 years. And then, we all of a sudden start releasing this last distiller's drawer, which is heading towards 6 years. And it's the exact same caution. Mm. And the irony to me is, as a maker, is, so you're saying that the rum that has been in a barrel for 6 years, it's pretty neutral barrel at that point. Would we all agree? Mm-hmm. And you're telling me to transfer it back into a used barrel that had something in it for 4 years? Let's do the math together.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're beginning to realize that we did find a very good relationship and balance that allows us to do what we do, and that allows us to appeal to people that love American spirits, which allows other people to think that they enjoy rum, a new group of people to think that they enjoy rum, and begin to explore the many other excellent rums that are being made. But at least have that landing point, and that much like a club is a point of comfort that allows you to go further, so too is landing in your first brand that you really like, and then getting curious from that. And that's been what we've seen a lot of over these last 18 months.
Yeah, it definitely, like we said, it definitely surprises folks that, I did actually share that with some friends that had over this bottle, and they are more of a bourbon drinkers, or Scotch drinkers. And, I said, oh, wait, something else I had. I said, here, try this. Oh, no, that's too sweet, or this. I said, okay. I said, well, here. I said, try this. And they were like, wow. And again, it's one of those, that's rum. Yeah. Yes. No, that doesn't taste like rum. Well, it's made from, molasses, sugarcane, etc. No, that's not rum. Well, again, what is, it, again, people don't get hung up on a preconceived notion of what rum is. Well, it's also what's been marketed to you and pushed down your throats and these specials at the restaurants and bars, and said, this is what rum is. No. But
I like it. It can't be rum. We did a funny event in Tennessee. So we've had a lot of success in Tennessee that's been important to us, thinking about the whiskey lovers market and so forth. And, when you think about what states you want to go into, you definitely want, it's very interesting to enter a state where they produce a lot of spirit. Mm. So where I live, Massachusetts, and let's say all of New England, we're a beer country. And if we talked about the elites and early adopters versus the early mainstream market, well, let's think about it. Up here in New England, I'm going to go to the same tap room all the time, and I'm going to be excited when they come out with a special release. So I can sit in both the elite and the early majority market at the same time, right? I don't only need the next thing all the time, but I also will go back to their mainstream core products and love those. So I got a main beer company right here. So I love filling up the truck with beer and coming back home and driving my fiance crazy by filling it with beer.
That's a hell of a beer run.
Oh yeah, so it's good. And now it's distributed in more places, which doesn't take the fun out of it. But I always go back to the smaller releases too.
Right, yeah, and I think that's an interesting, as you mentioned, the beer. Right, is there was a big boom about 10 years ago of craft brewing. It seemed like everywhere there's a brew pub, microbrew, etc. And so.
Oh no, I got to get another beer. You got me thirsty. I'm bringing you guys with me.
Oh, this is great. Yeah.
Does this feel like a home visit, like tour?
This feels like this feels like a scary movie kind of thing here with the camera facing, right? This is so if you're watching the video, you gotta, Andrew's going for a walk here to get himself.
That was the distillery. I do it all in the kitchen.
Yeah, get himself a beverage.
Just like Sam Adams.
So, all right, let me totally shift gears here, and again, I would assume you get this question a little bit, and is with as you said, your namesake is and why it always stuck in my mind was I know, and just common name with Henry Cabot, or is there somewhere in there, or just totally, do you get that question?
Oh, Henry Cabot Lodge?
Yeah.
More of a politician. Our family was typically more business.
Okay.
So it was always related. I mean, pretty much anyone in New England's related. It's
wait, that's not. No, you don't live in West Virginia.
No, I said New England. We're no better.
No.
It was
there goes all our West Virginia listeners.
More about wealth preservation than anything else. But yeah, we're no better. Yes, the Henry Cabot Lodge and two cycles of it were obviously interesting, great men, depending on your politics. Our crew was always industrial, always entrepreneurial, a little bit more bloody knuckled early, which is not the worst legacy. And still to this day, it's interesting to have a family that has such a strong culture. Not a lot of pretense, not a lot of stuff that gets families into trouble. And to be back to the beginning, 1701 arrival, not English, not came over in some luxury liner with steam trunks and all the rest, actually came over from the Isle of Jersey. And the history there was a mother who basically had 3 sons and thought they were drinking too much hard cider and sent 1 to London and 2 to America. And that's the rest of the story.
Okay. Interesting. So, so the company here, so you recently had who's your head distiller now?
So we have a team, and one of the things I'm a huge believer in is teams make it better. I'm not a big fan of chef's culture. I know there's a lot of people that talk about head distillers, and I think the true genius of a distillery is the master blender. They're the one who has to create something that's never been made before. Distilling is relatively technical. Managing a barrel room is much more sophisticated in my mind. Please allow other opinions. But I think, head distiller is such a handle for people to say, oh, the head distiller is blank. But I think, it's a good question how much distilling they do. Or are they really somebody in a kilt and bagpipes that go to cocktail parties and talk to clubs? So I think that's where I would emphasize. Now, the president, I'm going to go to more business language. Our director of production is a gentleman named Dylan Caron, who's been with us for over 7 years. He really took over the floor operations 3 or 4 years ago. Has very natural talent, has strong beliefs about what things should be, which is helpful. And yet at the same time, he's always curious about what else we can do. He's managed most of the major blends for us for the last few years. And I would say under his watch, you could talk to the Florida Rum Society. They participate in some of these things. And by the way, it should be this way, but the rum significantly gets better every single year. Mm. And we like to showcase what was made 6 months ago, 18 months ago, and so forth, because we like showing you the evolutions. And what's really fun with, there's some more to the geeky crowd, is explaining what the changes we made were. And really explaining why they're experiencing the change and what it was and the choices we made. And we love that approach. Dylan has two people that work for him full time, and then he's got an operations person on top of that. And so production is production for all the things including fermentation and cleaning.
Right.
So again, distilling is just a small piece of the mix. And I would say the operations person is the person who's making the many barrels move around the room, harvest them, make sure they get processed properly, make sure they get stowed properly, aged properly, all the things that have to happen from an operations perspective. We've separated that from operations that I do, which is get underneath the tank, get into a still, fix the boiler. It's a separate set of skills. Half the time it involves a contractor. It's a little bit grumpy or old role is better than a younger guy who's energetic, just to keep prices where they should be, and keep people honest. But we found that separation really helped, because if you think about it in terms of software, to have somebody who's dedicated to supporting the development team, it could be QA, there's other roles that can support, allows them to do a much better job of the things that only they can do.
Right.
And then having somebody who's shifting in and out of that role, I don't think is as helpful. So I pulled all that back, and I just keep everything running. So
you mentioned software there. So it sounds like you are not a fan of agile development.
No, I was. No, extreme development agile was coming around when we were there. That to me is velocity check-in.
Yeah.
And I use different language than I'm sure people use now, but that was early, that was engine check, concept checking, right. Build something, does it stand, add to it, does it still stand? It was really, I don't mind velocity work. Mm-hmm. I think you can actually accomplish some great things. I think personal experience architecturally, it fell down sometimes. Mm-hmm. You didn't always anticipate everything that was coming.
Right.
But if you're willing to always evolve and stay in an evolutionary mode, not just finish the project and move on, awesome.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit of exposure to that whether we've gone through the new world of agile versus SDLC, waterfall. See, folks are probably like, I thought we were talking rum here, and here we're talking about
No, sorry, we should move on. Yeah. But waterfall, by the way, that's out of the 70s. That's really you're really dating yourself now.
Hey man, are you still aging me here? I made a reference to the turn of the century, and now it's the 70s. Come on, man. I was only I was born in 74. Come on.
That's 10 years after me.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like, now how many folks are employed at the company?
So we used to have a wholesale team, which we moved to formal distribution with COVID. And that was a good choice, and it was the right time for a few of us. But now we're at 8 people, and we probably will, I'm going to say something so I can answer this question better. We're really dialing into this American New England rum story. And you could talk to the Florida Rum Society about it some more, but I think we've really landed ourselves, and you're begin to see us put more investment into marketing and clearly messaging what we do. And so that'll be the next big push for us. Okay. But yeah, we have PR and we have the people on the outside doing things, but I do think it's time for a through line conversation on what we do, how we do it, how it compares, and put that in front of the people that are going to be more likely to like us.
I know that's really interesting. So, and we talked a little bit about the barrel picks and the groups and so forth. How many groups are actively part of doing barrel picks, or is it just kind of? Or I guess how does that kind of work out there with you guys?
That program is exploding. I mean, it is just we did more, almost twice as many this spring as we've done in the past.
Oh.
and we have a lot of sales set up for this fall. So really, it's almost 3 times our norm. The original vision of the private barrel for us, it was forced on us. Now think small distillery, craft distillery, where we had a distributor that was being more mischievous than I would appreciate. And actually, bigger brands were buying our database of customers, and we were essentially under attack. And President's Club was benefiting from a larger supplier putting money in the coffers. And we woke up, and in the span of about 3 weeks, we lost 50% of our market in one state, our home state. And what was interesting to us is realizing we could never put ourselves in such a vulnerable position again. Alcohol distribution is exactly what it is. There's excellent and there's not excellent. And we pushed down the private barrel path in rum, I think quite a bit earlier than most people. To give you context, the bourbon whiskey world was kind of offering you 3 sister barrels, but they would strap a medallion on the front of it and say you picked it. And they talked to you about proofing it differently. It wasn't truly differentiated barrels that were meant to appeal to different palate. So it's straight out of the, you get the idea. Yeah. So even compared to the bourbon whiskey world, we were relatively early, and we were doing it out of necessity. And the logic of the necessity was, if you're competing with somebody who has 100 sales reps and can put the person back in that bar, restaurant, whatever it is, every third day, once a week, whatever it is, you can't cover the market with 2 people anywhere near as well. And that means you're constantly vulnerable. But by moving to private barrels and selling a whole volume and a commitment and customizing, and in the language of 2004, calling it a differentiated service, letting them hand pick it. So the full concierge experience meets something they really want at the right price, at the right proof. What it meant is we could sell in a quarter of rum at a time. And the commitment was to take the rum over that period of time, or maybe sometimes a little longer, depending on the size of the venue. And our sales team could go on and go to other venues. So it's interesting. Our entry into private barrels was quite a bit different than most people's. But it was serendipity in the sense of, that definitely felt like a broken jaw in the moment. But it forced us to move earlier than many. And our private barrel business is extraordinary now. And It's all over the world, and it's in many states. And we have some states that have done 24 barrels in the last 6 months. I mean, not even our home state. That's not what you, and many others I should add. But it's interesting that from a tough moment came something that a lot of people wanted. And we were very lucky to be them.
Yeah. And that's, I think, for those that don't understand, or, again, may not know it, this is where groups or a restaurant or some entity seeks out and says, we want our own barrel with our own, as Andrew said, such a particular style or whatnot, and it's theirs, right? And I know Florida Rum Society does a lot of that as well too. We've got a large group, there's a commitment to it that, so again, it's great that distillers know that, hey, we've got a guaranteed, sale, I guess, if you want to call it, for lack of a better term, but appreciation for the product too.
Well, they wouldn't buy it unless they wanted it more than what else they can get. And at the time, we would characterize it as, the last scene from, what's the name of the movie? Harrison Ford, not Temple of Doom, but the first one of that.
Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Raiders of the Lost Ark. The last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you have basically cases up to the ceiling of crates. Well, that's a distributor warehouse. And forgive me, even to this day, scarcity is a little bit of a contrived phenomenon. There is legitimate scarcity. You asked if I made a 1919 bottle of rum, that's scarcity. But what you were seeing was this sort of manipulation, market dollars, all these influences, allocations, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody comes along and says, wait, we got 10 different barrels. Why don't you pick the one that you really love? Okay, and while you're here, why don't we proof it to the level that meets your budget needs and your cocktail program and everything else? Okay, fantastic. And we'll put your name on the label. We're obviously privateer, but much like what you have in front of you, we're going to customize it so people know that you went to all of that work for them, their customer, and you made the choice, and you can talk about it. And that's obviously one for a club, but it was a very powerful concept 5 years ago, whatever it was. and it was newer to rum. And I think it was pretty progressive even by whiskey standards. I know there's whiskey people that are going to correctly challenge me on that last statement, but from what I could see, we were not late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I've heard of things like that from people that I know that are Scotch drinkers and have talked about, going in on a barrel, or going to Scotland, flying to Scotland. You talk about really feeling uber, whatever you want to call it, enthusiast, connoisseur, and flying to the location, trying out that, forking down your quarter or whatever it is share of
And the tax code used to allow you to visit your barrel once a year, inexpensive.
Oh,
I don't know if it still does. I don't want to imply that it doesn't, but you can imagine if you're a golfer and you're looking for a weekend alone or with friends, and you can go one weekend to pick a barrel and then a year later to go back and golf and visit your barrel inexpensive. That's pretty excellent.
Yeah, we need to check. We need to look into that. So I'll have my staff.
Call St. Andrews as a tasting room.
Let me know. I'll go with you. So I'll have my staff look into that. So so now that's really great for those that it's again for those that are listening to this is the dip the toe into the water of something a lot better quality to elevate if you're looking for something to elevate if you're
and differentiate. I mean, they're really going down this new American oak, American made, that whole process, best of rum, but best of spirits as a guiding principle has been very important to us.
So so definitely I know we have one particular bottle that you have here. So real quick, what is the lineup that you currently have out, available?
What's interesting, our core goods, which, Navy Yard, Queen Share, White, we have a gin that's, molasses based. I'm not forgetting anything. Really, the Queen Share is evolving to a Queen Share 4-year. We're much happier with that. They've all done very well. The other one is New England Reserve, I should say, which is, an extraordinarily good product, but the world hasn't quite woken up to it. But as soon as people buy it, it's almost like finding, a 4-pack of beer for $9. People are just like, how on earth did I get back to $9 from somewhere between 18 and 65? I mean, and I think in the world that's looking for the new and the exciting and the rare, what I find fascinating is how many on-premise programs, which are typically a little bit more price sensitive, are saying it's the best value out there. Like we quality, taste, profile, cocktails, and a product that was, sure, it was made to be what it is. I'm fascinated to see that the market, I thought, was less likely embrace it and run with it, particularly in a world of rum, which is so subsidized and there's so much, pay to play and all this stuff. It's not unique to rum, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So I think that's the lineup. But what's been really changing for us is this growth in the private barrels, and now it's significantly more than 50% of our business and growing. And for the rum business people out there, what I'd say is, they should caution me to be afraid of this sort of market and having sort of the fragility of a long tail of single casks that are independent and different and so forth. But the truth is, the emergence of rum is so new. The penetration of rum is insignificant of quality rum that, I'll take a whatever it takes attitude. What I find in my experience, which is, I spent a lot of time in the market these last 18 months and before, is, you buy one letter of marque and then you find another letter of marque through another club or another group or whatever it is. And then you go to one from the store. And by the time you get to your third, you suddenly say, God, Navy Yard's amazing. And you go to core goods. And if you're more geeky and collecting and all those wonderful things, and again, I'm a software geek, so that's good. You'll keep collecting the private barrels. But what you're going to realize is that the underlying products are excellent. And we see this really nice migration or evolution into still open to private goods, back to the beer conversation about Massachusetts, and increasing excitement about the core goods and adopting them. So, if you think about a P&L, I'm watching, if you break down by core goods and these private barrels, 6 months later, I've got a complete reversal. I'm going, 66.33 one way, and then 6 months later I'm 66.33 in the opposite direction, with kind of a 25% growth underneath it. So it's just outstanding to watch. But I've never seen anything like it in business.
Yeah, and so definitely check out the website, and we'll make sure we'll hit at the end there is the offerings and how you can get it and so forth. So I was just thinking there, Andrew. So again, also on the website, what was kind of interesting was there's on the website I guess it's called Learning About Your Barrel, right? Do you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is in the old days we did what was called a distiller's drawer line, which was very local Massachusetts. And then we also did our core goods, and we were trying to express what rum could be all the time. So we would put more information than you would expect. We can't fit everything on the label, so let's put more out there so you can have more of a relationship with the bottle and understand what it is. Back to the Florida Rum Society, and much equally importantly, all the other great clubs that have been involved in the development of the RCA, the Club of Clubs, is they've gone a million miles past. They've now codified. It's somewhat derivative of Matt Petrick's work, and but we've really started to say we as clubs want to educate and inform and have standard where suppliers are at least accountable to express. They're agnostic in terms of this is how you make rum or that's how you make rum, but they're absolutely putting the pressure on people that have been a little bit mysterious about what they add to the rum to make it taste better. And they're absolutely a thorn for people that want to confuse age statements to achieve marketing value and not rum value. And give credit to the clubs. We talked about their importance in February and Miami and everything else. But, I hope the world in the future looks back on the work you guys are doing and says thank you, because the category will be created. The trust will be created between the consumer and the supplier and the category through this good work. And so what was our idea many, many years ago is now significantly improved by Will and John from the Rumcast and the 9 clubs that were involved in the original. I know there's more clubs in the group now, but the original 9 clubs that came up to Privateer and met in March and hammered all this stuff out in their own time. They weren't getting paid to do it. They were doing it out of a labor of love, and will give us all a much better rum world.
Yeah.
And you can't the reciprocal value there is 2 things. The consumer knows more and trusts more, and the supplier is accountable for more and wants to evolve how they do things. So it is a true reciprocity that adds value and encourages better behavior, better rum, better transparency.
And I think that's what all people ask for, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Understand, am I getting what I think I'm getting, or paying for, or whatever, however you want to say it, and if you're okay with that, things that are adulterated, or we talk about spiced or imitation X, Y, Z, and it's right there on the label. Okay.
Listen, I have no issue with people adding. Doesn't matter if it's sugar or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Just tell me what you did. Yeah. If the rum's delicious, I'll be the first one to say the rum is delicious. Thank you for telling me you added something to it.
Right.
Thank you for telling me it was only 4 years. I'm really impressed you created this great flavor in 4 years, not 10, as you put on the label.
Yeah.
I think actually it's symbiotic, and it's an opportunity for coming out of the cold, and it is much less judgmental. We saw a window of ranting, which I never find helpful, with how things are done. And I think the debate should have always been, what did you do? Mm-hmm. And did you tell us? And I think let the consumer decide what they prefer.
Yeah, that's fair. So just a couple as we start kind of wrapping up here, Andrew. I guess
Yeah,
again,
I gotta say, I got a date in 3 minutes.
yeah. Okay. So, all right. So in our segment here, I think again, I know you listen to the podcast, so you know what's coming up here is what we call the
in 4 sips or less.
All right. So this is in 4 sips or less here. First one up. Again, you listen to it, and all the rum guests, they all get the same question here. First coming up is, all right, in 4 sips or less, neat or on ice?
No preference.
Okay.
I think it's entirely up to the consumer, my mood. I mean, I'm drinking a beer tonight.
Okay.
I think some nights I want wine, some nights I want rum,
Right.
some nights I want neat, some nights I want an ice cube. I think the most important thing is if you buy a bottle of rum, please have it the way you love it.
Right.
And please have more than one opinion of it.
Yep. That's fair point. Okay. So, all right. So in 4 sips or less, question number 2 here. Okay. We talked a little bit about the, I know in the questionnaire about the, all right. So okay. Which one? Tell me. Here you go. Remember, this is in 4 sips, so I don't know how long it takes you to sip. Okay, so the Beatles,
I got this one.
Or the Who?
I gotta go, and I love the Who. I love the Who. I told you my favorite drummer was Keith Moon.
Right? Yep.
Okay, all right, and so I even remember. Okay, I don't remember when Kennedy died. I wasn't alive, but I do remember when Keith Moon died. So I have to go the Beatles though. I mean, they changed. It's like Elvis. They changed music forever, and I can't. I gotta say that we're all better because of it, but that's a terrible choice. You asked me to choose between, thank you for making my life hard.
You're welcome. That's why these aren't supposed to be made simple. Okay, so no, that's fair because again, as I mentioned, growing up, my folks coming over from Scotland and the British invasion, and that time, that's all my folks or my mom especially about is the Beatles. Sometimes she says I was named after Paul McCartney or Paul Newman. I don't know, but anyway, I was supposed to see Ringo 2 months ago, back in June. He was supposed to play here with the All-Star Band, and then 2 of the guys get COVID. Now it's pushed out to September, and it'll probably be my luck that a hurricane will hit, and I'll never freaking see it.
No, you're going. I feel good about it.
Yeah, I did see Paul McCartney 2017, so 5 years ago down in Miami, and that was the most I paid for. So, all right, so 2 more to go here. All right, so
2 more questions. Here we go.
So in 4 beats or less here, how did you feel during the 1986?
Oh, you are. Can I swear on this cast?
Go for it. I don't care. Don't fucking care.
Like everybody in Boston, that curse sucked. And I will tell you, in 2004, I couldn't bring my hands down from over my head. I traveled back and forth to all the games. So yeah, I was there for Freddie Lynn and Jim Rice. I was alive. I think I have to admit that I cried at that series. 86 was brutal. That was brutal. I mean, and how often in sports does one play determine whether you won the World Series or didn't? And Billy Buckner, think about him. He's the guy's body is so beat up, he can't give his glove to the ground. Right? I mean, everything about that moment just sucked. So I got to say, when I felt in the game, I felt everything. Everything.
I remember. I was a Mets fan when I lived in New Jersey at the time. So the Miracle Mets.
And I didn't. Okay, how about this? What I loved about that play is I had no bad feeling about the Mets. It wasn't like they cheated, they stole the game.
Right.
It was simply good for them.
Yep.
They came back and won Game 7. Good for them.
Yeah, and a lot of people forget, right? A lot of people thought that was the final game, and it's like, no, that was Game 6. No. Yeah,
there's a lot of posers out there. Yeah. Don't listen to them. Yeah.
All right, last one here. So in 4 sips or less, hopefully this not a tough one. I know you got to go. What will the rum industry look like in 5 years?
I think spirits is the most unimaginative industry in the world with the thickest skin of marketing that's ever existed. So what it appears to be could change a lot. Mm-hmm. What really changes, I think, will be less. I think that direct to consumer has been threatened forever, just like rum. But I think nothing would be better for a category like rum to have availability of more interesting spirits in more places at smaller scales to feed the early adoption market, to allow for distribution to have confidence in a product, to allow for the mainstreaming of spirit. And we're in what I'll call a wing stall over, if you don't get that enough air under and over that wing, you never really know what's going on.
Right.
And I think what I'd like to see, that's a change I'd like to see. I think transparency and the work of the clubs and the clubs to join and all the good work that's happening now is going to put pressure on the industrial rum producers. I think big brands are going to finally start to think more about, we can't have this sort of, here's where we make our money and here's this little kind of charming thing we're doing on the side. They've got to make sincere efforts to enter the space and ask themselves, let's look at one big company. Okay, so let's go buy Angel's Envy. What do they buy? Dewar's, Grey Goose.
Right.
So there they have the Manchelon rum, and I'm going to say let's say they did all the right things, but now it's time to come home to rum. If it's acquisitions, if it's whatever it is, own it, make the category great, because I think that will be a good thing. Equally, I think the small suppliers have to, it's like small software companies.
Yeah.
Innovate, create things, create engines that change the world. Yes, you're probably on a module and a platform. Yes, that you would benefit from having a suite of goods around you. Yes, integration is essential. Yes, all those things. But keep innovating. Change the fundamental capability of the potential of the platform. And I think smaller brands can start to do that more and more. I think geography goes far beyond this. The whole debate of, let's think about how false this dichotomy is. Caribbean versus continental. Whoa, rum's made in lots of places.
Right.
And where it's aged is interesting, but there's more than one continent and there's more than the tropical.
Right.
I think that changes. I think the TTB might wake up under pressure to recognizing and protecting the consumer the same way that it does the whiskey drinker. Mm. And I think that would be an interesting development in this country. What's the political will? It's not protecting the consumer right now. It's actually thinking that this is a spirit that's made here. So brands like ours, and there's others, of course, and I don't want to list them, but I give them a lot of credit for being in this game, need to work together to have our government set standards like, I'm not saying these are the right ones, straight, right. Bottom and bond, age statements matter, right. Give the consumer the same thing the clubs are advocating for through transparency. This has to be codified. And let's put it into law, and let's make imports have to stand at the same standards. Oh, and can we get rid of cover or carry over while we're at it? The most absurd law in the world, which gives excise tax back to U.S. islands because of hurricane relief, which is, how on earth do we make it possible for companies to avoid paying excise tax and punishing innovation who have to pay full board? Love to see somebody step up to that. And candidly, all you're doing is keeping more money for this country, which we need. Right. And if it's being wasted, it's being wasted. Let's stop those practices. Right. So that's probably a longer answer than you wanted.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of 4 sips, right? And 4 sips or less, right? So anyway, so I appreciate there you go. You put you for your
back
pain,
to 8%.
There you go. For your pain, you've made it through the rapid fire segment there. So there you go. You're now part of the alums, as we call it. Our drums.
I want that autographed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The Drums and Rums alums. So there you go. All part of the quirky group community. Connecting people that probably would have never ran into each other. Whether it's the musicians aspect that we have on, from Jim Riley from Rascal Flatts, or yourself, and again, connecting. Yeah. So that's all we're trying to do is connect people together, right? That. To as you mentioned, right, there's a certain pool of maybe consumers that are always going to be, that market, but how do you go after the next ring out, right? Those that
concentric circles.
Yep. So I definitely, Andrew, I know you got to go. So where can people check out, buy Privateer, get all that?
Privateer, about 20 states. Definitely go to the website. My email is andrew@privateerrum. I love the customer, full stop. And it doesn't mean I'll get back to you in like 6 hours, but I'll definitely get back to you. And please reach out. We do a lot of special releases. We love your questions. Yeah. Yes. You can find us at Sealbox. You can find us in other places. But I think why I'm hesitating as I answer this is what we made 2 years ago. And released 2 years ago is nowhere near in my mind, as close to my heart as what's coming out this year, next year. And I think like any entrepreneur or athlete or whatever it is, you're always looking forward what you can do and what you're doing. And you're possibly a little bit hiding that, what you did before, like a high school photograph. But I would much prefer to talk to you directly and tell you who we are, and let you decide for yourself.
Excellent.
So we'll direct you in your state to a store if that's what we have to do. We'll give you something that's more of a DTC option if that's what we have to do, and we're always here for you.
All right, excellent.
We love the Rum Crew.
There you go, guys. I mean, you can't ask for anything more from, the head of this company here to reach out to him, contact directly, and he wants to hear your feedback, as he said. So, Andrew, I appreciate it. So again, everybody, thanks for tuning into this podcast. Rate, review, subscribe to it. Check out our Drums and Rums, part of the JNC podcast network that we're starting up here to expand more of our stuff. Check out Privateer. We're going to post more of it here when this episode drops. I thank you. I appreciate the time, Andrew.
No, it's fun.
Yeah, this is again. I know we didn't get too nerded out, but it's definitly.
No.
Yeah.
You kept it really at a great level. I think it's really about people and introductions and yes, we're so lucky to have the experts. But let's move Rum.
Right,
brother. Good to talk, Paul. Have a wonderful evening. I got to get to a date, or I'm going to be a dead man.
Okay.
And nice to meet all of you out there in the blogosphere.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Andrew. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
If you like what we're doing here at Drums and Rums, we have a Patreon link to help with setting up interviews and creating content that you find entertaining and interesting. Also, if you'd like to sponsor, advertise on the podcast, or if you want to come on as a guest to promote something related to the show, email me at info@drumsandrums.com. Lastly, I want to thank Brad Brock tune titled Once Upon a Bottle of Rum, and check out his podcast, Jams and Cocktails. Thanks again for listening, where the backbeats meet the spirits.